watching.
Disturbing images tonight of Lady Gaga's dog walker attacked and her pet stolen outside of her Hollywood home. TMZ has obtained doorbell surveillance video showing a car pull up. Multiple suspects jump out and struggle with Ryan Fisher, grabbing the French bulldogs before shots were fired. Gaga is now offering a $500,000 reward with no questions asked, she says. LAPD's Robbery Homicide Division is investigating tonight. Race against the variants. Tonight, the concerning news about a new strain that's rapidly spreading. Some health experts are raising questions about whether it could impact the effectiveness of vaccines or other treatments, how vaccine makers are trying to stay one step ahead.
When COVID hit him, it hit hard.
It's been a common misconception, kids being spared by the virus. Tonight, a closer look at pediatric patients left with chronic long hauler symptoms.
How did you feel during that time?
Well, I was sick for about 5 days, and it was pretty bad. And then I felt completely fine for 5 days, and then I got sick again, and it really never went away fully.
The alleged plot to blow up the Capitol and kill as many members as possible. The warning to Congress about alleged threats to attack President Biden's State of the Union address by the same militia groups who attacked on January 6th. Declassifying a potentially scathing report on the brutal killing of U.S.-based journalist Jamal Khashoggi, last seen entering Saudi Arabia's consulate in Istanbul in 2018. President Biden speaking with the king today, but apparently no mention of Khashoggi. Our Mary Bruce asks the questions.
Will he be following up this talk with actions? Are sanctions on the table?
Power's back on, but Texas still struggling as the blame game goes around and around. Our Ginger Z examines the country's energy grid in this week's It's Not Too Late. And more than a game, the Major League's announcement of incorporating player stats from the Negro Leagues, fixing the glaring omission and putting the numbers in perspective. Good evening, everyone. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. There's a long way to go. Those were the words of the president today. While there is significant progress in the fight to slow the virus, concern is still growing about those variants, which is increasing the urgency to vaccinate as many Americans as possible, as quickly as possible. Today, President Biden marked 50 million shots of the vaccine have gone into American arms in the 37 days since he took office. The White House says 50% of Americans older than 65 have now gotten at least one shot. Biden says this is not a victory lap. Everything is not fixed. Tonight, though, cautious optimism in case numbers nationwide. The daily average of cases is down 74% from the country's peak last month. But here in New York, there is a new variant and still a high number of cases. Whit Johnson leads us off.
Tonight, researchers are closely tracking a new COVID variant now spreading rapidly through New York City. 2 new studies finding the variant is unique, but shares a concerning mutation with the more contagious Brazilian and South African variants. Some health experts now raising questions about whether it could impact the effectiveness of vaccines or other treatments.
How worried are you about this new variant in New York City?
I'm concerned about this new variant, quite concerned. It's carrying certain very important mutations that would allow it to infect people who already have protection against the previous variant.
But researchers stress it's not clear if this variant is more contagious or more deadly, and further study is needed. Trying to stay one step ahead, Pfizer and Moderna are already modifying vaccines to target the South African variant. And both companies are also testing a third booster shot of the original formula to see if they offer more protection.
When the vaccine becomes available, take it. The longer one waits not getting vaccinated, the better chance the virus has to get a variant or a mutation.
These new variants only adding to the urgency to speed up vaccinations. Here at the Javits Center in New York City, now a mass vaccination hub, they've already reached more than 71,000 shots. Nationwide, 66 million doses administered so far. And today, President Biden marking another milestone, half his goal of 100 million shots in his first 100 days.
50 million shots in just 37 days since I've become president. That's weeks ahead of schedule. even with the setbacks we faced during the recent winter storms.
But across the country, a scramble to get that coveted shot. In Massachusetts, 50,000 vaccine appointments snatched up in just 90 minutes. The unlucky ones sent to a digital waiting room.
I now had 6,886 minutes in the wait line within a period of 2 minutes. So it's just been an exercise in futility.
But more vaccine could soon be on the way. Johnson & Johnson ready to ship out 3 to 4 million doses of its one-shot vaccine as soon as the FDA grants emergency use authorization, which could come as early as tomorrow night. And another sign of progress. In New York City today, more than 60,000 middle schoolers heading back to the classroom.
Today marks an important step towards reclaiming our lives.
Right, so many eager to reclaim some semblance of normalcy. Whit Johnson joins us now from New York City. And Whit, the city tonight is urging the public not to get alarmed about this new variant.
Yeah, Lindsay, public health officials are telling people not to be too concerned. They're saying that there should be some skepticism that comes with this research, and they're telling people to stay the course, to continue ramping up vaccinations, and that will be the best way to beat back those variants. Still, though, researchers do want to take a closer look at not only this variant in New York City, but others that are quickly spreading across the country. Lindsay?
Whit Johnson, our thanks to you. And we've certainly been hearing a lot about COVID-19 patients known as long haulers, those battling the effects of the virus for weeks or months after diagnosis. Well, now we're seeing children suffering from these long-term impacts. One young boy asking Dr. Fauci for help. And today, the WHO issued a new alert about the urgent need to get answers. Here's ABC's Stephanie Ramos.
A year into the COVID pandemic, doctors are still trying to understand a constantly changing virus and how it affects children. In Missoula, Montana, 13-year-old Hudson Beard was a healthy 7th grader. Now he's a COVID long hauler. He came down with the virus in November and has not recovered.
When COVID hit him, it hit hard.
Months later, Hudson is in constant debilitating pain, his condition not improving. Just last week, Hudson got a chance to ask Dr. Anthony Fauci for help at this lecture.
Every day when I wake up, I have constant migraines, severe headaches, and I'm super dizzy. My stomach hurts, I vomit, my heart races, and I can't read or write. No other doctors can help me. Can you help me?
Dr. Fauci telling Hudson he hopes his body will recover, adding that there's a misinterpretation about kids and COVID.
There is a misinterpretation about this, that children are completely immune to any serious effects. You are a manifestation of that, of people who get a classic COVID-19 illness, but then instead of recovering, they get multi-system chronic signs and symptoms that can be mild or it can be debilitating. We don't know enough about it, Hudson, for me to honestly tell you what's going to happen over the next couple of months to a year.
In New York City, 13-year-old Maggie Flannery can relate to Hudson.
How did you feel during that time?
Well, I was sick for about 5 days, and it was pretty bad. And then I felt completely fine for 5 days, and then I got sick again, and it really never went away fully.
Maggie telling us she's still struggling after getting COVID last March, and then again early February.
Every day I will feel lightheaded and like I'm having trouble breathing, and maybe chest heaviness. And I had to completely quit ballet. I really just go to school and come home and do my homework.
What she and Hudson are going through isn't the multi-system inflammatory syndrome that's found in children, also known as MIS-C. They're in a different category of rare, with the so-called long haulers.
He's been in and out of the hospital 5 times now.
About 10% of adults who get COVID experience this post-acute COVID-19 syndrome, PAX for short, where symptoms last weeks to months to even longer. More than 2,000 children have been diagnosed with MIS-C since May of 2020. And while more than 3.1 million kids nationwide have been diagnosed with COVID since the start of the pandemic, what's still unknown is how many of these kids are long haulers.
We don't know enough people with this to really inform us how quickly to expect it to get better. And that's hard for Hudson. It's hard to know that you're kind of a new example of an illness that we're learning about as we're going.
So right now, Hudson's on a couple medications. He does take an anticoagulant for the dilated heart coronary arteries. He's also on a medication that hopefully will help his migraines. The problem that we have faced with Hudson is that we treat one symptom and then another symptom arises.
And it's hard being sick for a long time.
These kids hanging on to the hope that things will get better eventually.
The doctors don't really know very much yet, so they are kind of learning about it with us. But they have said that most of their other patients are just like slowly getting better and that it will end soon.
If you don't fight, you can't win. And if you win, it's because you fought.
For ABC News, I'm Stephanie Ramos in New York.
Our hearts certainly go out to Hudson. Our thanks to Stephanie for that. Now to Washington, where we heard alarming testimony today from the acting chief of the Capitol Police, telling Congress about threats to attack President Biden's upcoming joint address to Congress, warning that extremists want to blow up the Capitol, among them members of militia groups that were present at the Capitol on January 6th. So how real is this threat? ABC's congressional correspondent Rachel Scott has those details.
Tonight, the stark new warning from the acting Capitol Police Chief, saying domestic terrorists who stormed the Capitol on January 6 are now plotting their next attack. This time, targeting President Joe Biden's upcoming speech to a joint session of Congress.
The militia groups that were present on January 6 have stated their desires that they want to blow up the Capitol.
And with miles of fencing already around the complex, insisting security must remain high for now.
To stop a mob of tens of thousands requires more than a police force. It requires physical infrastructure.
That warning about what could come amid continuing questions about what happened on January 6th in the first place. Today, lawmakers pressing for answers.
You guys are in charge, though, of the security on the House floor, or are you just there to make sure that we take our coats off when we're on camera?
Police were outnumbered and overwhelmed, easily overrun by violent mobs hunting for lawmakers inside. Republican Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler telling the acting chief what she saw of the Capitol Police that day.
There was no coordination, and you could see the fear in their eyes.
On Tuesday, confusion about when the National Guard was called in.
Who did you ask for assistance at 109?
It was from Mr. Irving. I believe he was in the company of Mr. Stinger at the time as well.
And Mr. Irving, why would you not remember that?
Senator, I have no recollection of a conversation with Chief Sund. At that time, I was on the floor during the Electoral College session.
Today, the acting chief showing up with evidence, the phone logs saying they did call for help.
On January 6, Chief Sund first reached out for National Guard support to the House Sergeant at Arms at 12:58 p.m.
And tonight, we're learning 800 insurrectionists made it inside the Capitol that day. Other lawmakers insisting police had the intelligence but failed to act. But the acting chief saying today there was no intelligence, indicating an attack of this size and scale.
We acknowledge that there are a lot of things that should have been done differently.
And Rachel Scott joins us now from the still fortified Capitol. Rachel, such an alarming warning today. What are officials doing to make sure that this next joint address to Congress is safe when it happens?
Well, security measures, Lindsay, are now under review here. The acting chief saying today that while these fences that you see behind me are temporary, she believes that with the increased threats of violence right now, they are necessary. And so tonight, officials are trying to find a holistic approach, and they're really trying to strike the right balance here between making sure that the public has access to the United States Capitol while also ensuring that what happened on January 6th never happens again, Lindsay.
Understandably so. Rachel Scott, our thanks to you. Next, the U.S. is set to release a declassified report on the killing of Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi, last seen entering Saudi Arabia's consulate in 2018. The report is expected to conclude that Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, known as MBS, ordered the brutal attack. And today, President Biden made his first call to Saudi Arabia, bypassing MBS and reaching out to his father, King Salman. For more on their discussion, here's ABC's senior White House correspondent, Mary Bruce.
Journalist Jamal Khashoggi was last seen alive walking into this Saudi consulate in Istanbul in 2018 before being assassinated by a Saudi hit squad, his body dismembered. Now tonight, Washington is awaiting the release of an intelligence report expected to conclude that the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman approved the brutal execution. The Saudi government denies the Crown Prince was involved. President Biden today speaking with his father, the Saudi king, but the official White House readout makes no mention of the Khashoggi killing being discussed. The question now, will the Biden administration hold the Saudis accountable as promised? The White House has said Biden won't hold back. Will he be following up this talk with actions? Are sanctions on the table?
I think there are a range of actions that are on the table. Our administration is focused on recalibrating the relationship, as we've talked about in here previously. And certainly there are areas where we will express concerns and leave open the option of accountability.
Congress demanded the report be released in 2019, but then President Trump refused, even bragging to journalist Bob Woodward about letting the Crown Prince off the hook, reportedly saying, "I saved his I was able to get Congress to leave him alone. I was able to get them to stop." Before the cameras, defending the Crown Prince, too.
Nobody so far has pointed directly a finger at the future king of Saudi Arabia.
Mary Bruce joins us now from the White House. Mary, a bit of a head scratcher when we saw that White House readout of President Biden's call with the Saudi king, and there was no mention at all of Khashoggi. What do we know about that conversation?
Well, I've asked the White House this exact question, right? Was Khashoggi and his killing in this report not discussed? And the White House notes only that it was not mentioned in this official readout. That leaves open the possibility, of course, that this was discussed. This was a very carefully worded statement from the White House saying that the president, quote, affirmed the importance the United States places on universal human rights and the rule of law, but of course not actually mentioning Khashoggi at all by name. Look, this administration is trying now to reset the U.S.-Saudi relationship, and it's clear tonight they are treading very carefully here in how they handle this, Lindsay.
Yeah, very interesting there. Okay, Mary Bruce, our thanks to you. And when we come back, the disturbing story unfolding earlier today, a gold medal coach taking his own life hours after being charged with sexual assault and human trafficking. New York's governor under fire for his handling of COVID-related deaths in nursing homes, and now a new allegation from a former top aide. But up next, our exclusive interview with the attorney representing Britney Spears' father, who's had control of her career and finances. What does he say about the so-called Free Britney movement? Stay with us.
With so much at stake, so much on the line, more Americans turn here than any other newscast. ABC News World News Tonight with David Muir.
We have made it through another week together.
America's #1 most watched newscast across all of television.
Admit it, these days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. It's all about you.
Robin Roberts, George Stephanopoulos, Michael Strahan. Wake up with America's #1 most watched morning show. ABC's
Good Morning America.
The world may feel out of your control, but your happiness doesn't have to be. Learn the secrets to happiness. Listen to the 10% Happier podcast, free on Apple Podcasts.
ABC News honored winner for the second straight year with the Edward R. Murrow Award for Overall Excellence in Television. ABC News, America's #1 news source. Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues. The Hunt. True crime. 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Now, when it matters most, the straightforward facts. ABC News is America's #1 news. #1 in the morning, #1 in the evening, with America's most watched newscast. #1 in late night versus the competition. The #1 news magazine on Friday nights. #1 in politics across this historic election versus the competition. The #1 daytime talk show. And #1 in streaming news. ABC News is America's #1 news.
And next to the ABC News exclusive, Britney Spears' father speaking through his attorney about his role in her highly scrutinized conservatorship. Conservatorships are usually put in place for people who courts find to be unable to make decisions for themselves. Britney has been in one since she was in her 20s, and she is now 39. This legal arrangement has been back in the spotlight now, thanks in large part to a new popular documentary, and with so many asking why Britney Spears needs to be in one. Amy Robach sat down with one of her father's attorneys.
I understand that every story needs a villain, but people have it so wrong here.
The attorney of Jamie Spears, Britney Spears' father, is speaking out exclusively to ABC News.
This is a story about a fiercely loving, dedicated, and loyal father who rescued his daughter from a life-threatening situation. People were harming her, and they were exploiting her. Jamie saved Britney's life.
In 2008, following a bitter divorce, custody battle, and 2 hospitalizations, Britney was placed under a court-mandated conservatorship, which has been making medical and financial decisions for her in the last 13 years.
Hi, Britney.
The conservatorship, front and center of the new documentary, Framing Britney Spears, and is a primary focus of the #FreeBritney movement, a passionate group of Britney fans who believe she is being controlled against her will. Free Britney! Jamie's attorneys say court documents show that when he stepped in as conservator in 2008, Britney's assets were only worth $2.8 million. They say he worked with his daughter to restore her finances under the conservatorship to nearly $60 million in 2019.
It's a shocking number to know, okay, here's a rock star, a pop star, a young woman who's making $40 million a year, and somehow she only ends up with $2.8 million in the bank. Does Jamie know how that happened?
Britney's assets were clearly being mismanaged, and she was being taken advantage of financially by some of those around her.
How did Jamie turn Britney's finances around so dramatically?
He has collaborated with her. When she is up for performing, she has performed. When she wants to record an album, she can record an album. And when she wants to live her life the way she wants, like a normal person, he has collaborated with her to do that as well.
Since 2008, Britney has released 4 albums. Would you hold it against me? Starred on a primetime show.
I felt like I had a connection with you.
And even hosted her own Las Vegas residency. But she has not performed professionally since 2019, saying at the time she was backing out of an upcoming show because her dad was sick and she needed to focus on family. But last year, a seemingly different tune. In November, her attorney telling a judge, "My client has informed me that she is afraid of her father," adding she will not perform again if her father is in charge of her career.
Can you explain why Britney's lawyer is saying she doesn't want her dad in charge of her finances anymore, and she's actually saying, at least through her lawyer is saying that Britney says she won't perform anymore until her dad is no longer in charge of her? Why would that happen? Why would that statement be made?
Throughout 2020, Britney and her father had many conversations. And in fact, early on in the pandemic, they spent 2 weeks with other family members hunkered down in Louisiana. Britney and Jamie went on long drives together. They played and worked in the family garden. And every night, Jamie cooked Southern comfort food that the family ate and enjoyed together. And in that time, Britney never expressed those words to her father. She's never asked him to step aside.
Jamie's attorney says these videos, Jamie says he and the Spears family filmed and shared exclusively with ABC News, are from that family gathering, Britney horsing around with her sister, Jamie Lynn, riding a bike with her niece, and playing around with her family, including Jamie in the beard in the garden.
So is it the belief that this is something her lawyer's saying and that it's not coming from Britney herself?
Jamie loves his daughter. And like any other family, issues come up from time to time. But this in no way takes away from the love and support that they have for each other. Britney knows that her daddy loves her, and she knows that she can call on him anytime, conservatorship or not.
Vivian, it is difficult to understand then why Britney's lawyer actually took it a step further and said that Britney was scared of her father, scared of Jamie. Does Jamie have any idea why that statement would be made?
In the many conversations that Jamie and Britney had throughout 2020, Britney never said those things to Jamie. She never asked him to step aside.
If Britney, through her lawyer, though, is asking that Jamie, her father, not be a part of her conservatorship, why does Jamie then still insist on being her conservator?
Jamie serves as Britney's conservator because he loves her. He wants the best for Britney.
Hey, hey, whoa, whoa, the conservatorship has got to go. Hey.
What do you make of the Free Britney movement?
I think we have to remember how this conservatorship was started, and that Britney needed help, and that's why the conservatorship was put into place and why Jamie was appointed.
Has Jamie asked Britney, because Britney could put this all to an end right now if she just said, hey guys, everything's cool, I don't need to be freed, I'm living my life the way I want to live it, and I've got people around me who are guiding me. Why wouldn't she just put that out there on social media?
You'll have to ask Britney.
Lots of questions there. Our thanks to Amy for that. Still ahead here on Prime, lawmakers grill executives of the Texas power grid after that state's massive blackout as we examine the state of our nation's power overall and if it's ready for climate change. Today, the House passed the Equality Act extending civil rights protections for LGBTQ Americans. How many Americans consider themselves LGBTQ? We take a look by the numbers. But first, our tweet of the day. Hasbro announcing it's going to call Mr. Potato Head, Potato Head, but keep the Mr. and Mrs. Potato Head toys. The internet was very confused. So am I. Stick with us.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
The story is incredibly dark.
Bizarre.
Crazy. Doomsday.
She planned on surviving the end of the world.
Yes.
This is the story.
Dad, Lori, can you tell me where your kids are?
That stunned a nation. Now, as police build their case, staggering new details, recorded conversations, interviews with family, and what helped lead the police to them.
You saw some things on a computer?
Yes.
And what did you see?
I saw
the new 2020 event special, Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
Vaccination. In 5 days, we think America's finally ready for this.
Revolutionary.
A show by Black people for all people about the Black experience in America. Unapologetic, uplifting,
unfiltered, breath of fresh air.
So much humor. And there will be music. Tuesday night at 10/9 Central on ABC. Soul of a Nation. This is Common, and I hope you'll watch Soul of a Nation. I'll be watching.
In recognition of all you've done, the people of the world hereby crown you Queen of Soul.
Make sure the world only sees the Aretha Franklin you want them to.
You got to disturb the peace when you can't get no peace.
This is what you were meant to do.
Genius, Aretha. Premieres Sunday, March 21st at 9 on National Geographic.
Welcome back, everyone. And now to the LGBTQ community. The House today passed the far-reaching Equality Act that would extend Civil Rights Act's protections to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender Americans. This comes as a new study finds that more Americans than ever are now identifying as LGBT. Here's a look by the numbers. 5.6% of U.S. adults say that they are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and/or transgender. That's according to Gallup. Now, that's the highest since Gallup started polling on this issue back in 2012, when the number was just 3.5%. And if we just look at young adults, so-called Generation Z, 15.9%, or nearly 1 in 6, say that they're LGBT. That's compared to 9.1% of millennials, 3.8% of Generation X, and just 2% of baby boomers who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender. Now, taking all generations together, the majority, 54.6% of those who identify as LGBT, say that they're bisexual. And finally, 224 to 206. That was today's House vote passing the Equality Act, a top agenda item for President Biden, but it still requires 60 Senate votes to become law. And still lots ahead here on Prime tonight. A cool new project from our partners at 538, combining the Major League records with the Negro Leagues. This after Major League Baseball said that they would merge the two. We speak with the great-grandson of an all-time great Negro League player. Is our power grid ready for climate change? After last week's debacle in Texas, Ginger Z brings us another installment of It's Not Too Late. But first, a look at our top trending stories on abcnews.com.
The story is incredibly dark.
Bizarre.
Crazy. Doomsday.
She planned on surviving the end of the world. Yes.
This is the story.
Dad, Lori, can you tell me where your kids are?
That stunned a nation. Now, as police build their case, staggering new details, recorded conversations, interviews with family, and what helped lead the police to them.
You saw some things on a computer? Yes. And what did you see? I saw
the new 2020 event special, Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
Vaccination.
America, get ready for this. All the pain, all the joy. A show by Black people for all people about the Black experience in America. It's time to go there. And there will be music. Coming Tuesdays this March to ABC.
Soul of a nation.
Soul of a nation.
Soul of a nation. We're ready for this.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Friday nights, 9/8 Central. True crime, cinematic, real-life drama, stunning, the unthinkable. Follow the clues, The Hunt, True Crime, 2020. Friday nights, 9/8 Central on ABC.
The most powerful stories of our time, anytime. Nightline.
And breaking tonight, the United States has conducted a military airstrike in eastern Syria along the border with Iraq, according to a Pentagon spokesperson. The strike was ordered by President Biden and targeted Iranian-backed militias in retaliation for a February 15th rocket attack against a U.S. base in the northern Iraqi city of Erbil that left several Americans injured. White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki had said last week that the U.S. reserves the right to respond in the time and manner of our choosing to the attack. Lawmakers grilled executives of the Texas power grid about why the system was allegedly minutes away from a total blackout. Texas Governor Abbott said that the responsibility lies with ERCOT, the agency that manages 90% of the state's power grid, claiming they didn't take last week's winter storm seriously. ERCOT claimed that it was less than 5 minutes away from a total blackout that could have left Texans in the dark for weeks. The president of ERCOT defended the agency's actions, saying that the blackouts that plunged millions into darkness may have caused human suffering, but saved the system. While many in Texas are still recovering from that deep freeze, the unanswered questions have turned the spotlight on the power grid. Ginger Z in this week's It's Not Too Late breaks down why experts say this disaster is a reflection of how our changing climate can lead to extreme events and that it's crucial we prepare.
Hi, I'm Ginger Z, and it's not too late. So now that our nation is thawing out and power's back on, it seems the questions and frustrations seem to be rising as quickly as the temperatures.
I've never imagined any of this was going to happen.
I mean, how in a world where we can see this in a forecast for at least a week in advance does a human catastrophe like this happen in 2021?
Our wind and our solar got shut down. It just shows that fossil fuel is necessary.
Oh no, the wind turbines did it? Really? Well, it turns out the turbines did freeze in Texas, but they only represent 20% of the Texas grid. But the main culprit, the deep chill that stalled natural gas production. Natural gas is what powers the bulk of Texas's electricity supply. But this was a failure from many different sources of energy, including coal.
We had snow covering solar panels. We had ice on wind turbines. We had natural gas supply constraints that caused a lot of problems with natural gas generation. We even saw problems with a nuclear plant that tripped offline.
The demand was simply too high, so they had to shut it down. There's also one big difference in Texas. Most of Texas is the only area in our country that is not on the national grid.
So during the kind of the mid to late part of the 20th century, FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, they derived their authority to regulate the transmission infrastructure because of interstate commerce. The Texas utilities said, nope, we're not going to connect to any neighbors outside of Texas. So we will have a grid within Texas. So we're not subject to federal regulation.
Not subject to federal regulation, but also not able to have the backup. See, in each of these sections, if, say, the Great Lakes starts to go out of power, they can pull from the Dakotas.
The larger the interconnection, I think the more resilient that you are to unexpected difficulties.
What in the world does that even mean, though, the national grid? I mean, have you taken a moment to think about where your power comes from? We have a little primer. So the grid is the system that carries electricity from the source, and there could be many, to your home. But that route is not always a direct one, and not everybody is on the same grid.
So the electric power system is comprised of generators that provide the energy into the transmission network, and then that's delivered to the customers through distribution infrastructure. And it all has to work together. It works at the speed of light, where the supply needs to be matched exactly with the demand at all times.
ERCOT is similar to an air traffic controller. It doesn't own the airplanes or the runways, but it steps back and makes sure everything is flowing properly and efficiently.
When a lot of the utilities were going offline last week, ERCOT saw that they were just moments, and we're talking 4 minutes from epic shutdown. So they had no choice but to initiate rolling blackouts. Other states had rolling blackouts too last week, but theirs lasted minutes. In Texas, it was days. Jesse Jenkins says that the biggest failure, Texas didn't have an adequate plan to keep the power on in the event of a winter storm of this magnitude.
The calculus in Texas was that this was something, not that they didn't have to plan for, and what ended up happening is it was outside of the kind of even the extreme scenarios.
ERCOT CEO Bill Magnus told ABC News Live that they had to protect the grid from damage, and he acknowledged that the state's infrastructure just isn't set up for this type of cold weather. But he said that ERCOT doesn't have the authority to change that.
We're not the policymaker, and we're not the regulator. So if there are ideas after we review this event, as everyone does, regulators, industry, ERCOT, everyone else, that there need to be changes in that arena, absolutely.
Now, this event was historic. Dallas dipped to 2 below zero. That's their second coldest on record. Only ever been colder more than a century ago. But this isn't the first time that Texas has been that cold. It actually has happened a couple of times in recent history, both in December of 1989 and in February of 2011.
The big freeze of 2011 caused major headaches. We're talking about broken pipes, frozen pipes, rolling blackouts. something we never want to experience again.
Back in early February of 2011, they dropped into the single digits in El Paso.
You know, we're usually summer peaking utility. It's not so common, perhaps, that we have so much of these cold fronts, but perhaps that is changing. And so 10 years ago, when we learned the lesson here in the Sun City, we wanted to make sure that we were just as prepared.
And I don't know if you remember that map, but El Paso was one of the areas in Texas not managed by ERCOT, but rather they are on the national grid.
I think a lot of the conversations happened a decade ago when we had our experience. And I think as a community, we made that determination that those investments were going to pay off, and they proved that they did.
Granted, El Paso only dropped to 14 degrees last week, but they only had 3,000 customers without power. A third of those only lost it for 5 minutes. Here's the real kicker. That 2011 storm that got El Paso all motivated to invest in winter protection was the same storm that prompted the federal government to warn all of Texas that they were not prepared for extreme winter weather. They told them the extreme winter weather is inevitable. It was the same report that said that they had warned them the last time it happened in December of 1989. So will it change after this one? Jenkins says it would be well worth their time and money to prepare because infrastructure, and we're talking all of it, beyond Texas, from California to Puerto Rico, needs to be what he calls future-proofed from extremes.
All of these kinds of events are exacerbated by climate change. And what that means is that the past isn't necessarily a good guide for the future anymore. So what we might have thought of as a once in 100-year flood or a once in 100-year drought, we just can't say that anymore because the last 100 years is not a guide for the next 100 years.
It's time to prepare, and I promise it's not too late.
Time to prepare. Our thanks to Ginger for that. And with spring training just around the corner, we're taking a closer look at major change by Major League Baseball, which announced in December that it would finally include the records and statistics of the 7 Negro Leagues that played in the early 20th century as part of MLB's statistical history. A new project by our partners at 538 shed some light on some of the former Negro League players who will now be Major League statistical stars. Victor Oquendo has this story.
For more than a century, professional baseball has given fans countless memorable moments and players. Joe DiMaggio's 56-game hitting streak, Ted Williams batting .406 for a season.
He hit that one into the next county.
Hank Aaron breaking Babe Ruth's home run record. But until recently, that long history hasn't told the whole story. Black baseball players were left out of the major leagues in the early 20th century, so they organized their own teams. In 1920, Andrew Rube Foster gathered other team owners and formed the Negro National League, the first organized league for black baseball players, later joined by the Negro American League and other regional leagues. Legendary players like Satchel Paige, Josh Gibson, Oscar Charleston, and Cool Papa Bell helped the Negro Leagues maintain its popularity and would themselves become Baseball Hall of Famers. But 1947 marked a turning point when Jackie Robinson appeared in a Major League Baseball game as a member of the Brooklyn Dodgers, breaking the league's color barrier. Soon, more black baseball players would join the newly integrated MLB, leading to the decline and eventual end of the Negro Leagues. And for decades, all that had been accomplished in the Negro Leagues would not be considered Major League. But this past December, Major League Baseball announced that the Negro Leagues would finally be given Major League status along with their statistics and records. Now Negro Leagues pitching great Satchel Paige will have his accomplishments added to those from his MLB career. And one change is likely coming to the record books. Former catcher Josh Gibson will have baseball's best single-season batting average, hitting .441 in 1943. At long last, this major omission corrected, a major change for the major leagues. For ABC News, I'm Victor Oquendo.
Major changes indeed, our thanks to Victor. And for more of this, we're joined now by Sean Gibson, the great-grandson of Negro League all-time great slugger Josh Gibson. And he's also the executive director of the Josh Gibson Foundation. Thank you so much for joining us.
For having me.
So you are, your great-grandfather is already in the Baseball Hall of Fame for his storied career, but how significant was it for you and your family that Major League Baseball made this move to finally honor Negro League statistics as part of Major League Baseball's history? And what do you want to see happen next to make this a reality?
Well, yeah, well, number one, it was a great honor for our family and the other families of Negro League players. You know, it was something that we felt was long overdue, but we always considered Josh Gibson a major leaguer anyway. It's just now that he's recognized in the Major League Baseball stats. And moving forward, we just want to know what's going on. I mean, right now, Major League Baseball made the announcement, and we were kind of up in the air of what's the next direction. And so hopefully we'll find out soon when these stats will be officially included into their record book. So that's one of the things we're waiting on right now.
And what do you say to critics who say that it's really difficult to incorporate Negro League statistics, that it's apples to oranges because it was different competition or different lengths of seasons between the major leagues and the Negro Leagues?
Well, you know, you're always going to have critics no matter what, you know, no matter what it's going to be about, whether it's Negro League baseball or something else. You know, I will say this for the critics. I mean, we all know Josh Gibson had a great career in the Negro Leagues. I mean, he's considered one of the greatest baseball players of all time. And so, you know, for the critics, you know, it's just mainly proving them wrong is that Josh Gibson now is going to be considered one of the greatest baseball players of all time. And, you know, Josh played in a time where blacks weren't allowed to play in the majors. And so now that Major League Baseball finally recognizing that and going to include their stats into their record books, it's a great honor for our family.
And what about those who say, though, that this is too little too late by Major League Baseball for the Negro League stars who were denied the right to play in the major leagues?
Yeah, you can say it's too little too late, but I guess everything is about timing. The one part about it is that, you know, all the great players who paved the way for these great Negro League stats, they're all gone. They're all dead. And so, but, you know, I'll give it up to the historians. This is a lot of work that was done over 20 years of research. And so for these guys to come up with this research over 20 years, about 75%, 80% of the stats they collected, you know, so, you know, you can always say too little too late, but it's all about timing. And right now we'll take it.
Our colleagues at 538 have done a really deep dive looking at the statistics of Negro League stars. Who are some of the names of the Negro League players who should become as well known as Babe Ruth or, say, a Mickey Mantle?
Oh, yeah. I mean, 538, they did a great job. Of course, besides Josh Gibson, you got Satchel Paige, you got Oscar Charleston, you got Buck Leonard, you got Turkey Stearns. I mean, all these great baseball players will be included into Major League stats now. And so, you know, what 538 did, I read their article this morning, and they did a phenomenal job comparing Negro League stats, Negro League baseball players, to Major League Baseball players with their stats. So I will say this, you know, a lot of people know about Josh Gibson and Satchel Paige, but there's a lot of other great Negro League baseball players that will definitely be recognized through these stats when they come out.
And lastly, you're also leading an effort to have the MLB Most Valuable Player Awards named after Josh Gibson. Why is that so important to you, and has the MLB been receptive to the idea?
Well, it's very important to me and my family, and also Negro League, and also the other Negro League families. You know, as I stated earlier, Kennesaw Mountain Land is denied African Americans the opportunity to play baseball. And so if Josh Gibson was be able to rename the MVP award after him, it would not just be about Josh Gibson. It would be about the 3,400 men that were denied the opportunity to play in the majors. Major League Baseball, it's up to the Baseball Writers Association. And so we're hoping that they take that in account of Josh Gibson's accomplishments, as well as the other great players.
Sean Gibson, thank you so much for your time. And for more on this, be sure to check out the incredible work by our colleagues at 538. Check it out at 538.com. And when we come back, Dr. Jen joins us with tips on how we can all preserve our emotional health as we get through these challenging times. Stick with us.
Admit it. These days, what you need to know
seems to change just about every day.
What is it that you really want to know, need to know?
To help you not just get through your day,
but to make the most of it. Feel smarter.
Feel better.
Feel happier.
Well, how about a third hour of Good Morning America in the afternoon?
GMA 3, what you need to know. Lunchtime at 1 Eastern, 12 Central and Pacific on ABC. It's all about you.
I know what happened, and I'm not guilty.
Why the fascination with criminal trials? Figure out what's really out there.
which revealed she had murdered his family.
I know in my heart they did this.
It's the time of suspicion.
The ending's really tough.
You don't know whether truth is going to be difficult to find unless you try to find it.
The story is incredibly dark.
Bizarre.
Crazy. Doomsday.
She planned on surviving the end of the world. Yes.
This is the story.
Dad, Lori, can you tell me where your kids are?
That stunned a nation. Now, as police build their case, staggering new details, recorded conversations, interviews with family, and what helped lead the police to them.
You saw some things on a computer?
Yes.
And what did you see?
I saw
the new 2020 event special, Friday at 9/8 Central on ABC.
In recognition of all you've done, the people of the world hereby crown you Queen of Soul.
Make sure the world only sees the Aretha Franklin you want them to.
You got to disturb the peace when you can't get no peace.
This is what you were meant to do.
Genius, Aretha, premieres Sunday, March 21st at 9 on National Geographic.
The reality is our country can collapse from within.
You see the white power movement on the march. Klansmen and neo-Nazis, skinheads, it's meant to incite war.
From the KKK to Oklahoma City to Charlottesville, the new documentary event special.
We just need to start talking about race.
Homegrown hate, the war among us.
This is a real wake-up call.
Streaming now on ABC News Live.
Researchers are closely tracking a new COVID variant now spreading rapidly through New York City. Two new studies finding the variant is unique, but shares a concerning mutation with the more contagious Brazilian and South African variants.
How worried are you about this new variant in New York City?
I'm concerned about this new variant, quite concerned. It's carrying certain very important mutations that would allow it to infect people who already have protection against the previous variant.
But researchers stress it's not clear if this variant is more contagious or more deadly. Trying to stay one step ahead, Pfizer and Moderna are already modifying vaccines to target the South African variant. And both companies are also testing a third booster shot of the original formula to see if they offer more protection.
When the vaccine becomes available, take it.
Former coach of the U.S. Olympics gymnastics team, John Geddert, has died by suicide. It came hours before Geddert was to turn himself in to face 24 felony charges, including sexual assault, human trafficking, and running a criminal enterprise.
These allegations focus around multiple acts of verbal, physical, and sexual abuse perpetrated by the defendant against multiple victims.
Those victims were girls. Geddert, who has a gold medal as the head coach of the 2012 Olympic team, trained at his gym. And that gym, called Twist Stars, was where his friend, Dr. Larry Nassar, was convicted for sexually abusing young women and girls.
Tonight, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo under fire. Today, his office defending its decision last spring to return COVID patients to nursing homes, which critics claim led to a high number of deaths. Lawmakers now considering stripping Cuomo of his COVID emergency powers after his aide admitted hiding nursing home deaths for fear it would be politicized by the Trump administration.
We should have done a better job of providing as much information as we could.
It comes amid new allegations of sexual harassment against Cuomo by former staffer Lindsey Boylan. Boylan alleging several unsettling episodes, including a 2017 flight where she says the governor joked, "Let's play strip poker." The governor's press secretary in a statement saying claims of inappropriate behavior are quite simply false.
Shots ringing out in Myanmar's largest city of Yangon today. The video shows local residents protesting the appointment of a military council administrator for their area before police fired into the crowds to disperse them. It's unclear if anyone was hurt. Protests have been taking place in Myanmar for weeks now. ever since the military seized power and detained the country's democratically elected leader, Aung San Suu Kyi. Tensions in the country are high. Today, a crowd of pro-military demonstrators attacked people protesting against the coup. One man seen here on CCTV footage wielding a knife and attacking another man.
Police say last week an Arizona man faked his own kidnapping to avoid going to work.
He at first stuffed a bandana in his mouth, and afterwards he took off his own belt and bound his hands.
The man claimed the kidnapping was over his father's death.
After we showed him all the information, he admitted that he fabricated the story.
The 19-year-old was fired from his job and is now charged with reporting false information.
Welcome back, everybody. For all of us, certainly this pandemic has just upended our lives in many ways that we never expected. But as vaccines continue to be rolled out and we begin to see the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel, what will our new normal be like, and what kind of lessons will we take away from all of this? ABC's chief medical correspondent, Dr. Jen Ashton, the woman who knows all, tells all. She has authored a new book titled The New Normal, A Roadmap to Resilience in the Pandemic Era. She is kind enough to join us now. Thanks so much for coming on the show, Dr. Jen.
Lindsay, I miss you in person.
And same to you. Good, nice to lay eyes on you virtually, at least this way. So first off, congratulations on this new book that will surely help so many navigate what is to come. The foundation of your book is all about accepting this new normal for what it is as opposed to what we want it to be. So tell us a little more about that premise, and what are some of the ways that we should be prepared to adapt?
Well, first of all, Lindsay, as you know, because you and I have been living and breathing and eating and sleeping all things COVID now for over a year in terms of our coverage, you know, I really wrote the book because I was hearing from viewers and my patients alike that they wanted more than what we could really do a deep dive into in a television segment or a live stream segment, because they wanted to know how to process the medical headlines so that they don't get whiplash. Things are changing every day. We're learning more about this virus and this pandemic every day. So really the bottom line is that I realized it wasn't about explaining the fact du jour. It was about trying to explain to people and teach people how to think like a doctor, which you don't need to go through 4 years of medical school to learn. But in doing so, as I walk people through that thought process in the book, then it really gives people the tools to navigate these, you know, rapidly changing and ever-evolving circumstances that we're living in.
And you also talk about the importance of not only physical health, but mental and emotional health as well. And the fact that wellness is no longer a buzzword. What are some tips to try to keep this trinity as sharp as possible?
Well, I think first of all is acknowledging and recognizing that every single one of us has been under physical and mental strain over the course of the last year at some time or another. Communicating, talking about it, being open, really waiting to hear the answer when you ask someone, how are you? And really giving an honest answer yourself when you're asked about that. Then when it comes to our physical health, and I really don't believe in disconnecting, you know, the rest of the body from the head, it's really about doubling down on the foundations that we need to be healthy and well in the best of times, let alone in pandemic times. So that's our fitness regimen, believe it or not, that's our rest regimen, and that's our nutritional regimen.
Really waiting to hear an answer when someone says, how are you? That is such good advice, and hopefully people will live up to that. Of course, there has been so much loss this year in so many ways, whether you lost a loved one, a job, or even the simple ability to spend time with your friends. What's your advice to people who feel like they just don't have any more gas left in their tank to be resilient?
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, there are times that I feel like that myself, many times, in fact. And I think that what I've learned as a doctor in practice who still has real patients in addition to what I do for ABC News, I think it's to recognize that we all are more resilient than we even realize, and that it's not about necessarily looking 1 week or 1 month or 1 year down the road. It's about just being present and controlling the things we can control right now. And that's how we help a patient recover in the hospital. And I've really looked at this country like it's one giant patient during this pandemic. And so I think just taking those baby steps is really important when we're feeling like we have nothing left, no more gas in the tank.
And lastly, what are some tips and insights for parents taking care of both their kids and even their elderly parents and trying to find a way to balance it all without continuing to feel that burnout?
Well, you know this well, Linz, as a mom of younger kids, and my kids are older, but, you know, I think we're both sandwiched in between caring for our children and also keeping an eye on our parents. And I think that this pandemic has been uniquely difficult and painful for those extremes of ages, our kids and people who are older. And I think we need to recognize that and approach those age groups uniquely and individually and specifically, because what they're facing is very, very different than what we're facing. So I think acknowledging that and taking an individualized and really personalized approach with those age groups are really important.
My friend and colleague, Dr. Jen Ashton, thank you so much for your time and your insight as always.
Thanks, Lindsay.
And be sure to check out Dr. Jen's Prescription for Health, Your Heart and You, airing at 8 and 10:30 Eastern tonight, right here on ABC News Live. Before we go, our image of the day to anyone watching who has to still put on a coat when you go outside. Take a look at these players from the Tampa Bay Rays stretching during spring training practice. Spring and warmth not too much further away, looking for that sunshine. That is our show for this hour. Be sure to stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. I'm Lindsay Davis. Thanks so much for streaming with us. Have a great night.